Welcome to Your Business is Not Your Boss. I am your host, Geoff Welch, and I help small business owners overcome overwhelm and replace overthinking with intentional action. What is up? Welcome to episode 29 of Your Business is Not Your Boss. I am your host, Geoff Welch, and today we are going to dive into a topic I can't imagine everyone won't love, and that is assumptions. The assumptions we make, maybe the parts of us we project into situations. We're going to get into this a little bit because I had a fascinating exchange with my wife that I cannot, for the life of me, imagine is unique to her. Okay, but first, before I jump in, if you're feeling stuck, if you are feeling like you're feeling overwhelmed, like you know you have these goals and this potential for you and your small business, and yet you're having a hard time getting traction. You're having a hard time making consistent, intentional progress towards those things. I want you to grab my anti-overwhelm playbook. You can get it at geoffwelch.com/playbook, and it is a quick guide that's going to help you start to move forward with intentionality. It's going to help you start to put your priorities ahead of maybe all the noise that shows up and that distracts you throughout your days and your weeks. And it's going to really help you to get the head start you need, the traction you need to start making real progress. Okay? geoffwelch.com/playbook. Go get it now. Before I get back into the topic, I do want to just acknowledge here, depending on where you are consuming this, here may look different. This is actually the second episode that exists both as an audio podcast for you listeners out there, and also as a video podcast on YouTube. So if you are in either of those places, I just want you to know the other one exists. If you're catching this on YouTube, there is an audio-only version that you can listen to when you're driving around. And if you're listening to me while you're driving around or mowing your yard or sitting at your desk or whatever, there is a video version if you ever miss seeing my face, which, okay. Anyway, back to the topic of the day. So, my wife and I were having a conversation at one point about a frustrating interaction that she had with a colleague, right? And we've all had those, right? Whether you work in a traditional job or you are a small business owner like you are, you're gonna have situations where there are frustrating exchanges. Maybe you feel like there's a misunderstanding, that you're not communicating clearly enough, or you don't understand what they want, or it's clear there's something else going on other than just what's happening, right? Like the reactions of maybe yourself or the other person are being colored by something else, and you can't quite put your finger on it. The details of this conversation are wholly unimportant. We've absolutely all had them. But what was interesting was that as we were just driving, her and I, and just chatting about kind of how her week had gone. The conclusion we came to as we were driving around talking about this was that maybe 50% of the facts, these quote unquote facts that she was using to decipher or make sense of this situation were actually assumptions. They weren't facts at all, right? They were feelings that she had. They were things that that I think we all maybe give more weight to than they deserve. And there were all these projections as well. How she felt about the person was coloring how she felt about the interaction. And man, I'll tell you what, I offer this to you not because I think this is unique, but it's because I think that it is something that we all do. I mean, I do it like I'm turning pro, right? Like I can do this like a boss. And it is a very intentional process for me of saying, okay, I need to parse this out, because what I think is happening is I may be adding things to the situation that don't really exist. I may be clouding up the facts that exist in this interaction, in this sequence, with my own feelings, with how I feel about myself, how I feel about the other person, all these kind of things. And so my wife was just a trigger here to remind me that, man, if I do this and if she does this, it's possible we're the only two people in the world that are on that train. But I have enough coaching clients and enough people that I work with, that I just interact with as a professional, to get the pretty decent impression that we're not even close to alone. And in fact, it may be, I mean, universal is never true, right? There's never, always and never always incredibly dangerous. But I would say it has to be a large percentage of people that do something similar, right? That take a situation and we add a bunch of other stuff in the mix, right? So what I think is interesting about this is, and this is me speculating here, right? I'm doing exactly what we're talking about. I have to wonder, maybe that's a better way to put it. I have to wonder if part of the reason we do this is that we are so wired to put the puzzle together, right? We don't like there to be gaps in the puzzle. We don't like there to be space in between the known and the like where we started and where we end. We want continuity. And so it seems that we are happier to invent puzzle pieces to fill in those gaps, so that we can say, there is a nice continuous path through this circumstance situation, than to say there are things that I don't know and don't understand about this. I think the ideal situation is that we go and ask clarifying questions. We say, this is interesting. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know why this is happening the way it is. I should ask them. But some of us will do that. But many will say, instead of that sounds uncomfortable. I'm just going to invent something. I'm just going to take what I know, fill in the gaps with a bunch of stuff I don't know, and feel pretty good about the picture that I've created here. It's been said many times that, in the absence of information, we invent a story. When you don't know why your boss is reacting the way they're reacting, when you don't know why your partner is doing the thing that they're doing the way they're doing it, what we do is we start to, we do some math and we say, oh, it must be this. And sometimes we probably get it right. Sometimes we're pretty close, depending on how well we know the person, how long we've worked with that person. We may know people pretty well and be able to ascertain, I think it's probably because of this. But in almost every situation, the best way to be sure is to be able to have, sometimes it's a crucial conversation, right? Sometimes it is a difficult, challenging conversation that really needs to be handled with delicacy. But other times it is just a fact-finding mission, right? It's like, hey, when we talked the other day, I was a little confused about X, Y, Z. Can you clarify for me? Sometimes it can be that simple. So I think sometimes we want that complete picture. We want the map to be continuous. And we feel like even if I have to invent parts of it, at least I feel better believing that there is this thread that runs through it, right? So the next time you find yourself maybe describing it to a friend, to a colleague, to somebody else, that when you're airing your I guess airing your grievances isn't the right thing. That's a Festivus thing that probably doesn't apply here. But when you're sharing your frustration with someone else, if you use the words, I feel like, that should be a trigger for you that you are probably treating an assumption as a fact. I feel like, generally speaking, there are plenty of situations where your feelings are the things that you need to measure, right? When you're talking about an interaction with another person and what they were thinking and why they did something and what is at the root of the friction or the misunderstanding, when you start to use words like I feel like, it generally is an indicator that you don't know something, right? Otherwise, you would say, I know this, or this is the case, right? When you say I feel like, it tends to indicate that there is an unknown, but you don't want to say, I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on here. It could be this, right? That's a less, that sort of gives yourself less certainty, right? To say I don't know is uncomfortable. To say I feel like is to say I don't know, but it gives it this sense of like, you put your stamp of approval on it, right? You're indicating internally that even though you don't know what is true, you don't know what the facts are in this situation or for this part of the situation, that you've come to a conclusion and you feel really confident about it, right? And again, sometimes you might be pretty darn right because you know that person very well, or because you have a special insight because of the length of your relationship, or anyway, that you might have something there. But I think it's a good thing to pay attention to. It's a good thing to be aware of when you start saying things like I feel like, when you're dealing with a vexing situation. And this can be, you don't have to be sharing it with someone else either. Sometimes it's just the conversation you're having with yourself in your head. Or is that just me? When you are expressing yourself and you say things like I feel like, just pay attention to what comes after that. And use that as a measuring tool or use that as a trigger to say I need to measure what comes next and figure out how much I really trust what that feeling is all about, right? So instead of settling for a grossly inaccurate analysis of a given circumstance, you can choose to acknowledge that you might have missing information, right? That you don't have all the facts that you would like to have, and this is just real talk here, right? A great percentage of the calls that I have with clients, with people who feel like they're stuck, with people who don't know how to move a project forward, with people who are trying to figure out what happens next, a massive percentage of those are two things that happen, right? One, the determination that they need to have a difficult conversation with someone or a challenging conversation. And so we have we talk in that session about what makes it challenging. Why isn't it just a conversation, right? What is it about what has to happen that makes it challenging, difficult, uncomfortable, crucial, whatever you want to say, right? But they need to have a conversation with someone about the thing that's in the way, right? They need some more information. They need to clear things up. They need to advocate for their position, right? And two, we talk about how to have that conversation, right? So we talk about healthy ways to engage that, ways that they could start that conversation, get into that conversation so that they can not only get what they need out of it, right? Like the object is not to go in there and have a fist fight. The object is not to just yell and scream until you get what you want, but it's to ensure that you get what you need out of that conversation, right? How do we engage in a conversation in a way that ensures that I'm going to get the feedback that I need? And how do I do that in a healthy way that ideally preserves the relationship, that ideally helps us to be ongoing partners, so that we can do this again and again and again, and we can learn more about each other, and maybe eventually at some point you say, I feel like, and you're pretty darn close to the truth because you know this person very well, and you've had enough of these real like in-depth conversations or meat and potatoes conversations where you get into it, that you've learned a lot about them. You haven't avoided going a little deeper, right? So these kind of things are happening all the time in these coaching calls because so many of us struggle with the ability to just say, I need to go ask. Instead of inventing what I think was going on, instead of making up some filler to help me make sense of what was happening in this interaction, we go to the source and we say, hey, can you help me understand this? And again, sometimes that can be very direct. Sometimes it needs to be handled a little more delicately. But there are ways to get what you need that aren't just working off a feeling or being frustrated because you believe something to be true that might not be true at all, right? And how many times have each of us made an assumption about someone's reaction, about why they did this and how dare they, and eventually found out that we didn't understand the situation, or we didn't have a shared understanding of the situation, right? I thought this, they thought that, and oh, well, yeah, I guess if you thought that, it makes sense that you would react that way, right? We learn that the way we see things isn't the way everyone sees things after a while, hopefully, and that the assumptions we make are based so deeply in our own narrow perspective about what is happening in any given situation, right? We have such a limited amount of information in almost any interaction with another human person because people are real complicated, right? And so what happens is we use that tiny bit of information to try to explain everything instead of saying, I think maybe I'm missing something here. Can you help me understand? And maybe I should do another episode about all the questions that you can ask when you're not sure if you understand somebody. That might be a good episode because having the ability to ask these questions that sort of invite someone to explain themselves and are sort of leading, well, not leading questions in terms of like leading them to say what you want, but leading them to be more expressive and more to give them the opportunity to verbalize their perspective and where they're coming from in a way that maybe you don't currently understand. All right, so you are the problem. You know what I mean, right? You are likely inserting a lot of yourself into some of these situations that feel challenging and that feel frustrating. And you can either accept that and say, yeah, what I know and believe about this situation is incredibly limited and I don't care. Or you can say, I think it's worth having a conversation with this person to learn a little more about how we could do this better, about how we could have a deeper shared understanding. Okay? So while my anti-overwhelm playbook doesn't get into that specifically, if there are situations in which you find yourself stuck, not sure what to do, you're not sure if you should have that conversation, you're not sure how to get traction, I hope that you will reach out and grab that at jeffwelch.com/playbook. It's a great resource and a great tool to help you get jump started, and probably something that's worth revisiting from time to time when you feel like, I feel a little bit mired today. All right, that's it for me. Don't forget, if you are saying things like, I feel like when describing your interaction with someone, you are likely taking an assumption and regarding it as fact, not a great idea. That probably is a conversation that you need to have that will help you get clarity and understanding between you and the other person. And always remember, your business is not your boss.